In a world where voices breathe life into pages, welcome to Sparrow's Realm. The story begins. Chapter 1. The first thing Su Minglan saw was light, not the sterile white of a hospital, but a deep, flowing radiance that shimmered like molten starlight. It came through a great window that curved above her meditation chamber, revealing a galaxy bathed in spiritual luminescence. Nebulas pulsed with slow, sacred rhythm, and streams of chi floated like ribbons across the void. She could feel it hum beneath her skin, alive and responsive, as if the whole universe breathed in time with her. But then the stillness cracked. A flood of alien memories surged through her head, names, ranks, battles fought on distant worlds, endless orders barked through command arrays. Lingshu Command, Azure Dome, Admiral Su Minglan, Supreme Commander of the Ninth Spirit Fleet. And then one sharp, undeniable truth. She wasn't just in another world. She was inside a story she had once read. Her stomach twisted. Oh no. Because Admiral Su Minglan, the woman whose identity she now wore, was a notorious villain. Cold, merciless, a cultivator whose aura alone could crush lesser souls. And her most infamous act? Destroying the spirit root of her own disciple, Li Yuren, the hybrid heir of a fallen serpent clan. He was meant to be the novel's protagonist. And in the original story, her cruelty was the spark that turned him into a monster. Before she could even begin to panic properly, a metallic chime echoed inside her skull. System activation detected. Mission objective: prevent Li Yuren from falling into darkness. Guide him to ascend to the celestial realm. Only then may you live. Su Minglan froze. Wait. What? The voice was calm, genderless, and utterly unbothered by her spiraling dread. Reminder: the previous host failed and perished. Please do better. Her first instinct was to scream, but her throat only made a strangled sound. She clutched at her robe, the silver-stitched insignia of Lingshu Command gleaming faintly in the chamber's light. The air smelled faintly of spirit incense and ozone. She took a deep breath and forced herself to sit upright. Okay, think. If this is real, then Li Yuren is still alive. Which means the story hasn't reached the point of no return yet. And if she wanted to survive, she'd have to stop him from turning into the demon that devoured half the galaxy. No pressure. A soft knock sounded at the door. The chamber's automatic seals parted, and 3 attendants entered, each clad in ceremonial white armor, faces half-shrouded by veils of energy. Admiral, one of them said carefully, your disciple awaits your summons. Right. The disciple. The snake in question. Su Minglan's pulse spiked. The attendants moved aside as the doors widened further, and a tall figure stepped through the threshold. Li Yuren was just as the novel described, sharp-featured, unervingly still, with an aura that coiled faintly like something ancient and waiting to strike. His eyes were a shade too bright for a human, pupils thin and slit-like when the light caught them. Beneath his calm, there was a faint hiss of power, a quiet violence pressed down by sheer will. He dropped to one knee before her, the formal gesture of a disciple greeting their master. Master. His tone was flat, disciplined. You summoned me. Her mouth opened, then promptly betrayed her. Have you eaten? She blurted. The room fell into dead silence. The attendants exchanged alarmed glances. One looked as if she might faint. Even the air seemed to still, unsure how to respond. Li Yuren's gaze lifted slightly, confusion flickering across the controlled calm of his face. What? I mean, Su Minglan stammered, training is exhausting. You should replenish your spiritual energy. Eat something. A mortal body still needs care. There was a full 3 seconds of silence where even the stars outside seemed to pause. The Iron Admiral, whose very presence could silence planetary courts, was worrying about her disciples' meals. The rumor mill was going to combust. Li Yuren's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, barely there, gone almost before she saw it. Understood, Master, he said finally, voice low. He bowed again, perhaps to hide the flicker of bewilderment on his face. As he rose, the system chimed quietly in her mind. Target's hostility reduced. Merit plus 10. Su Minglan exhaled shakily. Okay, good. That's good. He doesn't hate me yet. Progress. But her relief was short-lived. The attendants were still staring at her as though she'd sprouted a second head. What are you looking at? She said, trying to recover her usual icy tone. Bring food. Something high in chi concentration. The Lingshu rations won't do. They scurried out immediately. She turned back to Li Yuren, who stood with his hands clasped behind him, gaze fixed somewhere past her shoulder. His posture was impeccable, not a threat out of place, but his presence, his silence, was heavy. It hit her then, fully, what kind of person this version of her must have been to him. He looked at her like a soldier looks at a weapon. Not with respect. Not even fear. Just detachment, and acceptance that she might turn on him at any moment. Su Minglan swallowed. Li Yuren, she said quietly, about your last mission. It's completed, he said before she could finish. His tone was clipped, efficient. The rebel sect was eradicated. I await your next command. Eradicated? Her heart twisted. All of them. Yes. He hesitated, almost imperceptibly. Including the children. That was your order. Her stomach turned cold. She forced her face into neutrality, though her fingers trembled beneath her sleeves. The original Su Minglan gave that order. She remembered now reading about it, thinking how monstrous it had been. The system stayed silent, perhaps wisely. You did, well, she managed, hating how the words felt in her mouth. You should rest for now. No more missions this week. He blinked once, surprise flickering again. Rest? Yes. Another pause. Then, quietly, understood, master. When he turned to leave, the faint shimmer of his spiritual aura brushed against hers. It felt cold, controlled to the point of brittleness, like tempered glass stretched too thin. She had no idea how he hadn't already shattered. As the doors slid shut behind him, Su Minglan sank back into her seat, pressing a hand to her forehead. The silence of the chamber returned, heavy but somehow lonelier now. System, she whispered in her mind. Be honest. How many chances do I get? Only one. The protagonist's fall will result in your soul's dissolution. She groaned softly. Of course it will. Outside, the galaxy rotated slowly, rivers of starlight flowing past the transparent walls. She stared at them, the reflection of her own tired eyes caught in the glass. I can do this, she told herself. I'll just have to raise the galaxy's most dangerous overachiever. How hard can it be? The system did not answer, but somewhere in the void beyond the ship, a faint ripple of energy responded, as if the universe itself found her optimism amusing. And in his quarters below deck, Li Yuren sat in silence, staring at his hand where her chi had brushed against his sleeve. For the first time in years, the emptiness inside him didn't feel entirely hollow. Target's hostility reduced. Merit +10. Chapter 2. The next morning, Su Minglan woke to the low hum of the Azure Dome's main spirit core. The ship floated through a belt of luminous dust, thousands of drifting fragments from shattered planets, once homes to fallen sects, now reduced to glowing debris. The light from them filtered through her window, pale and cold. For a moment, it looked almost like snow. She sat cross-legged, activating the holoscreen beside her. Lines of text scrolled across, a record of Admiral Su's daily orders, past missions, and internal communications. The further she read, the colder her hands grew. Forced initiation at 12 years of age. 70-hour spiritual compression drills. Disciplinary confinement for lack of focus. It was all Li Yuren. Every order, every punishment, signed with her name. The original Su Minglan had called it tempering the root. Breaking him down so he would rise stronger. In truth, she had crushed him. She exhaled slowly, closing the file. Great. I'm living inside a galactic trauma report. System reminder. The host is advised to maintain consistency with the original personality to avoid suspicion. She rubbed her temples. If I stay consistent, the protagonist goes berserk and kills everyone, including me. You want that? No. Good. Then you can shut up for now. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, her robes too immaculate for how she felt. Admiral Su, the Ice General, was known for her unshakable composure. She would have to play that part, but maybe she could soften the edges. When she entered the central training bay, rows of disciples were already practicing formation flight in the spiritual simulation field. Thousands of spirit arrays shimmered around them, each pilot enclosed in a sphere of translucent light that mimicked the chief flow of real battle. Her presence silenced the room. Admiral on deck, barked a commander. The cultivators knelt in one fluid motion. Even Li Yuren, standing at the center formation, lowered himself without hesitation. Su Minglan's gaze flicked over him. His aura glowed steady blue, precise, restrained, almost mechanical. There was no trace of emotion, no fluctuation in chi. It was the perfect signature of obedience and numbness. She walked past him slowly, hands clasped behind her back. Resume simulation. A single command, and the room exploded into motion. Spiritual ships formed from chi and light took flight, dancing through the projected battlefield. Li Yuren moved among them like water, every strike calculated, every maneuver flawless. Too flawless. She could feel the suppression beneath it, his spiritual realm wound tight as a bowstring, filled with energy that had nowhere to go. Every motion precise, to the point of suffocation. When the simulation shifted to high-speed pursuit, the strain finally showed. A ripple of fury flickered in his aura, so faint that most wouldn't have noticed. But she did. The serpent within him stirred. Before it could fully awaken, she raised her hand. End simulation. The command cut through the field instantly. The constructs of light dissolved into sparks. Li Yuren dropped to one knee, breath steady, but eyes faintly glowing from the residual chi surge. Did I err, Master? You're overextending your spiritual realm, she said, stepping closer. At this rate, you'll rupture your meridians. He kept his gaze low. If the realm shatters, I will rebuild it. Her jaw tightened. And if it kills you in the process? That would be my failure, not yours. The words were calm, obedient, and utterly wrong. Su Minglan stared at him for a long moment. You'll rest for the next 3 days. His head snapped up slightly, disbelief flickering in his expression. Rest? You heard me. He hesitated. Master, rest is unnecessary. My spiritual reserves are sufficient to continue training at triple output. Triple output, she repeated, trying not to groan. You sound like an overworked spirit engine. You'll rest. That's an order. The silence stretched. Disciples around them froze mid-step, unsure if they were witnessing a breakdown or divine intervention. Li Yuren's gaze met hers. For a second, something unguarded passed between them, a faint confusion, maybe even suspicion. Then it was gone. Understood, Master. When he turned to leave, the light caught his face just enough for her to notice the faint scar along his jaw, thin as a blade's kiss. She wondered how many of those she'd given him. Later, in the officer's deck, whispers rippled through the ranks. The Admiral told him to rest? She ordered him to rest. Is she testing him? Or testing us? Su Minglan ignored them all, retreating to her private meditation chamber. She sat cross-legged on the spirit mat, the silence pressing in like a tide. System, she whispered. You saw that, right? That was me being merciful. Warning, deviation from original fate detected. Oh, come on. Deviation may alter protagonist's cultivation trajectory. Correction recommended. Correction denied, she muttered, folding her arms. Then fate can file a complaint. Host's sarcasm noted. Good. Keep noting. Her lips quirked despite the exhaustion. Somewhere deep inside, a small spark of satisfaction stirred. For the first time since waking in this world, she'd done something different. Something not cruel. Maybe that was enough for today. Down in the lower decks, Li Yuren sat in the dim light of his quarters. The training mark still glowed faintly on his wrist, a scar left by the spiritual simulator. He replayed the moment in his mind, her voice, soft but firm, commanding him to rest. No scorn, no threat. Just concern. Impossible. He'd spent half his life trying to understand her logic, her cruelty. To him, Admiral Su had always been the embodiment of iron, unmoved, uncaring, unbreakable. Now she had looked at him as if he were something fragile. He exhaled slowly, focusing on the sound of his breathing, the faint hum of the ship's chi conduits. Maybe she was testing him. Maybe she wanted to see if he'd disobey. But even as he told himself that, he couldn't shake the strange warmth that lingered from her words. Rest. He hadn't done that in years. The following day, Su Minglan reviewed the ship's internal status logs. Li Yuren hadn't appeared in the training bay. For once, he was actually following orders. Good. Still, she found herself glancing at his record every few minutes, just to make sure. By evening, her attendants noticed her distraction. Admiral, one ventured carefully, shall we summon the disciple back to resume drills? She looked up sharply. No. He's to rest. The attendant bowed quickly, hiding her shock. Yes, Admiral. When they left, Su Minglan sighed and leaned back in her chair. The stars outside shifted, their light reflecting faintly on her armor. The system had gone silent for once, as if giving her space. She found she didn't mind its absence. Somewhere on the ship, the boy she'd once destroyed was breathing freely for the first time in years. It wasn't redemption, not yet. But maybe it was the start of something close. Li Yuren passed her in the corridor that night, returning from meditation. He paused briefly, eyes meeting hers in the dim light, confusion flickering behind calm eyes. He bowed. Good night, master. For a moment, she forgot to respond. When she finally did, her voice was soft. Good night, Yuren. He walked away without a word, but the air behind him shimmered faintly, his spiritual realm quieter, steadier. And in her mind, the system chimed once more. Target's hostility reduced. Merit plus 20. Chapter 3. The Azure Dome drifted through the upper atmosphere of the spiritual belt, where the stars shimmered close enough to touch. It was said that in this region, even the void hummed with chi. The ship's outer array collected it in threads of light, feeding the cultivation chambers and powering the fleet's spiritual cores. Inside, Su Minglan stood before a glowing wall of manuals, thousands of sword scriptures suspended in luminous tablets, their words floating in midair like starlit feathers. Each text was a piece of history, techniques from vanished sects, forbidden movements erased from archives, ancient stances designed to split moons. Choose one, she said, turning toward Li Yuren. He stood at attention, calm as ever. His silver training robes caught the reflected glow, his hair tied back neatly. As punishment, master? She sighed inwardly. As training. You've already reached late-stage nascent soul. If you don't refine your control, your cultivation will stagnate. He bowed. Understood. She waited for him to ask questions, maybe even show curiosity, but he didn't. He simply approached the manuals, selected 3 at random, and knelt before them in silence. Something inside her twisted. He's not even interested in his own growth. He's just doing what he thinks I want. System reminder. Target compliance high. Emotional resonance low. Yeah, no kidding, she muttered under her breath. Because someone turned him into a sword that doesn't know what else to be. Host tone, agitated. Would you like to meditate? She ignored it and turned to leave. For 2 days, Li Yuren didn't rest. He spent every hour in the ship's training sanctum, surrounded by floating holographic swords and flickering arrays. The air around him pulsed with chi so dense it bent the light. His body moved like liquid metal, smooth, perfect, merciless. The disciples who passed by watched from a safe distance, whispering, 3 manuals in 2 days? That's impossible. They say he hasn't slept since the Admiral gave him the order. She must be testing him again. To see how far he'll break. Su Minglan heard those whispers too. Each one was a blade of guilt she couldn't deflect. By the 3rd day, the lights in the sanctum flickered. The ship's spiritual array registered an imbalance. Overcultivation detected in Deck 9, reported an aid. Su Minglan's stomach dropped. She didn't wait for the system to warn her. She moved, her aura flaring as she vanished from the command deck, reappearing in a burst of chi at the training sanctum. The chamber was chaos. The floor was cracked, energy spinning in spirals that distorted the air. At the center knelt Li Yuren, unmoving, surrounded by a storm of blue flame. His eyes were half open, pupils slit like a serpent's, and his body trembled under the surge of power. The spiritual realm inside him was fracturing, she could feel it, a wild, desperate pulse that could tear his meridians apart. Yuren. No response. She stepped into the vortex, her robes whipping around her as the heat bit through her skin. The flames licked at her aura, testing, searching for weakness. She knelt beside him and reached out, pressing her palm to his chest. The chi inside him was surging out of control, 2 conflicting streams of energy fighting to dominate. Idiot, she muttered, voice shaking. You were supposed to rest. Without another thought, she pushed her spiritual essence into him. The connection hit like lightning. His energy lashed back, meeting hers with violent force. Pain shot up her arm, but she held steady, forcing her chi to flow into his chaotic core. Slowly, carefully, she began to thread their energies together, her calm, cold light weaving through his raging storm. It felt like touching the heart of a star. Minutes or maybe hours passed. Sweat ran down her back, soaking her robes. Her breathing grew shallow, her vision flickered. But she kept going until his chi began to stabilize, the violent current softening, finding rhythm again. When it was done, he slumped forward, unconscious. She caught him before he fell. Her body trembled from the effort, her meridians burning, but a strange peace settled over her. For the first time, his aura didn't feel sharp or distant, it felt human. System alert. Host reputation minus 30%. Emotional resonance rising. Yeah, whatever, she muttered, her voice hoarse. Let them talk. By the next morning, the rumors had already spread across the fleet. They say the Admiral personally stabilized the hybrid's realm. She touched him? That can't be right. Maybe she's been possessed. Or, spirits forbid, she's fallen for her own disciple. Minglan overheard one of these whispers in the corridor and resisted the urge to slam her head against the wall. Possessed, she repeated under her breath. Yes. By basic human decency. The system made a small beep. Host's sarcasm noted. She dragged herself to the infirmary anyway. Li Yuren lay motionless on a meditative bed, his breathing steady. The ship's spiritual healers had examined him already, his chi flow was stable, his meridians unbroken. In fact, his spiritual realm was stronger than before, glowing with a faint trace of her own essence. Her chi. Inside his core. Su Minglan sat beside him, staring at her hands. They still glowed faintly from the transfer, her fingers tingling. The thought that she'd nearly lost him, the protagonist, her lifeline, the boy she'd destroyed once already, made her throat tighten. System, she said softly, I don't suppose there's a manual for this kind of thing? No manual available for human error. Figures. He stirred then, his lashes trembling. She froze, holding her breath. Li Yuren opened his eyes slowly, confusion clouding the usual calm. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. Then his gaze focused, and his expression shifted from disorientation to shock. Master. His voice was rough, low. You're awake, she said, forcing a calm smile. How do you feel? He sat up too quickly, wincing. What happened? You overcultivated. Realization dawned on his face. I failed you. You almost died, she corrected sharply. That's not failure, that's stupidity. He blinked at her, clearly unsure how to process that. She sighed and rubbed her temples. Next time, if I tell you to study, I mean study, not try to explode yourself. Understood. After a long pause, he nodded. Understood. Their eyes met. His were softer now, less like frozen steel, and more like deep water, unfamiliar, uncertain. And in them was something else too. Gratitude. He lowered his gaze. Thank you, Master. The words were so quiet, she almost thought she'd imagined them. She felt something strange bloom in her chest, warmth, fragile and dangerous. Rest, she said quickly, standing before he could see it. That's an order. Hours later, in her private quarters, Su Minglan sank onto the floor, exhausted. Her limbs ached, her chi reserves barely half full. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the echo of his spiritual pulse, calm and steady, mingled faintly with hers. Outside, the ship glided through a sea of stars that shimmered like droplets on glass. System update, host reputation -30%. Emotional resonance rising. Observation, the target's hostility remains lowered. Spiritual connection detected. She smiled faintly, too tired to care. Good. Maybe next time he won't try to blow up the ship. The system hummed once, as if amused. Down the hall, in his chamber, Li Yuren sat awake, feeling the residual warmth of her chi still lingering in his core. It pulsed faintly, gentle, steady, unmistakably hers. For the first time since his childhood, he felt safe. Chapter 4 The Azure Dome cruised along the edge of the stellar frontier, where the galactic ley lines grew thin and unstable. It was the border of the Alliance's territory, a place few dared to patrol. Stars here glimmered pale blue and green, their chi thin and volatile, making every cultivation maneuver feel like balancing on a blade. Su Minglan stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind her back, eyes scanning the horizon. Sensors had detected a small fleet of rogue cultivators emerging from the nebula rift, an outlaw contingent claiming allegiance to a fallen sect. Her lips curved faintly, an expression the crew knew meant storm incoming. Deploy spiritual arrays, she ordered. All fleets, prepare for combat formation beta. Li Yuren, you're with me at the forefront. He nodded, silent as ever. His calmness had become a shield, both comforting and terrifying. The battle began in a surge of color. Ships formed from condensed spirit chi darted like comets, leaving trails of silver and gold in their wake. Energy beams, guided by cultivation intent, cut through the void with lethal precision. Li Yuren moved alongside her, his aura contained, controlled, too controlled. She could feel it, a coil of potential energy wrapped tight around his core, waiting to break. Then it happened. The enemy unleashed a forbidden technique, a spirit-searing wave meant to disrupt hybrid bloodlines. Li Yuren's eyes flashed silver as the attack hit. The suppressed serpent spirit buried deep within him stirred violently. A low hiss echoed in his mind, rising to a roar as his aura flared uncontrollably. The spiritual realm around him shimmered, fractured, then exploded in a torrent of raw chi. Ships trembled. Alarms blared. Even the seasoned pilots faltered as the space around Li Yuren warped with violent energy. Waves of destructive force hurled through the battlefield, twisting the very fabric of the stellar frontier. For a moment, Su Minglan froze, heart-lurching. So this is what uncontrolled hybrid blood feels like. Then her training and instinct took over. She stepped forward, her spiritual aura expanding like a living shield. The windless storm of chi whipped against her robes, bending light and space around her, but she didn't flinch. "Yuren," she shouted, voice carrying in the void, amplified by spiritual resonance. He barely noticed, lost in the storm of his own awakening. His serpent eyes glimmered with primal power, his arms moving as if conducting the raging tempest around him. She drew on every ounce of her cultivation, letting her own spiritual realm extend outward. The energy she wielded was cold, pure, controlled, the opposite of the chaotic fire erupting from him. Slowly, deliberately, she wrapped it around him, drawing the storm into her own domain like a river flowing into a dam. The chi clashed, twisting and snapping like lightning, but she held firm, guiding the turbulence until it settled into harmony. Where the maelstrom had burned, now only the faint shimmer of residual energy remained. Li Yuren collapsed to one knee, exhausted, barely breathing, but alive. The bridge crew and surrounding fleets stared in awe. Soldiers knelt instinctively, mouths open, eyes wide. The Iron Admiral, the woman who had once been feared across a dozen star systems, had stepped into the heart of a hybrid storm and shielded him. Even seasoned commanders whispered. She's protecting him?" "Yes," muttered a young lieutenant. "By the stars, she's actually protecting him." Silence fell over the battlefield. Li Yuren's aura was still strong but restrained now, simmering under her control. He looked up at her, silver eyes meeting her cold gaze, and asked quietly, almost hesitantly, "Why didn't you strike me down?" The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. She crouched slightly to meet his level, letting the faint warmth of her aura brush against him. Her voice was low, steady, unwavering. "Because you are not my enemy." For a moment, he blinked. Confusion flickered behind the calm mask he always wore. Then the faintest exhale escaped him, and his posture softened. "Not your enemy," he repeated. It was strange to hear those words from someone who had once been the instrument of his suffering. "Not now, not ever," she said firmly, placing a hand lightly on the top of his head. The contact was fleeting, but it carried a surge of controlled energy, reassuring, grounding, protective. Behind them, the remaining rogue cultivators hesitated. None dared advance into the aftermath of the storm. Even their own attacks had been swallowed by the radiant calm that radiated from Su Minglan and Li Yuren together. "Maintain formation," she called. "Do not attack until I give the order." Her voice was like steel, slicing through the awe-stricken murmurs. Slowly, the remaining enemy ships withdrew, leaving the battlefield under the Alliance's control. After the chaos, Su Minglan stepped back. The energy in the base settled, rippling faintly as if exhausted. Li Yuren, kneeling again, didn't speak immediately. His breaths were even, but his gaze was fixed on her hands, the same hands that had drawn the storm into order, that had calmed what even he could not control. Finally, he whispered, I expected you to strike me down." After everything, she met his gaze with a steady, unwavering stare. "I said it before, and I will say it again. You are not my enemy. My mission is to guide you, to keep you alive so that the galaxy doesn't fall apart. That is all." He hesitated, searching her eyes, then nodded, still kneeling. A subtle shift passed through his aura, resentment, suspicion, and the quiet sparks of trust mingling together. System update, resentment decreased. Merit plus 100. She didn't need the chime to know. The change was already in him, the flicker of doubt toward her replaced with a faint flicker of reliance. Hours later, the bridge was alive with quiet chatter and astonished whispers. Reports from distant scouts filtered in. Even the lowest-ranking pilot had spread word of what had happened. The Iron Admiral had not only led the fleet, but had personally entered a hybrid storm and emerged unscathed. Her attendants still stared at her as she walked by, expecting some display of fury, some icy reprimand. Instead, she ignored them, walking to the observation deck to watch the stellar winds scatter across the void. Li Yuren followed silently. For once, he did not speak. He simply walked behind her, allowing her to move without the usual tension in his aura. The stars stretched infinitely before them, and in their reflection, she saw him. Not a disciple to punish. Not a hybrid to fear. But a person fragile, dangerous, and undeniably powerful. And for the first time, Su Minglan allowed herself to hope. This could work, she thought. I can save him. I can keep him from turning into the monster he was destined to be. The quiet warmth of his spiritual aura mingled faintly with hers, subtle but unmistakable. She felt it resonate through the deck like a pulse of life, proof that even the most violent storm could be tamed if one knew how. As the fleet continued its patrol, the azure dome gliding silently among the stars, she finally allowed herself a small, private smile. The first flames are behind us. And somewhere deep in her mind, the system chimed quietly, less like a warning, more like approval. Target's hostility reduced further. Merit plus 100. She closed her eyes, breathing in the faint scent of star essence carried through the observation window. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and dangerous. But for the first time in years, she felt ready. Li Yuren, still kneeling a few steps behind, exhaled silently. He didn't speak, but the tension in his body eased. He could feel her control, yes, but also her care. And perhaps, for the first time, he trusted it. In the endless expanse of the stellar frontier, amidst drifting planets and luminous dust, the Iron Admiral and her hybrid disciple shared a quiet, unspoken understanding. They were no longer just master and student. They were partners, bound by the survival of both his life and the fate of the galaxy. And the first flames had only just been tamed. Chapter 5. The Azure Dome drifted in a silent stretch of void near the Spirit Nebula, a cluster of drifting gas and star fragments so dense that even minor fluctuations in spiritual energy caused ripples across its expanse. The nebula glowed faintly in violet and green, suffused with latent chi, feeding the ship's cultivation cores, but also making the environment unstable. Li Yuren had been quiet for 3 days now. Too quiet. Su Minglan had noticed it hours ago. His aura, the silent coil of his spiritual realm, was growing wildly. Unchecked, it could destabilize the nearby chi fields, perhaps even trigger a demonic outbreak, a surge of corrupted energy that could devastate the frontier fleets and consume anyone within reach. She stood at the observation deck, her robes swaying gently as she watched him meditate in the training sanctum. His posture was flawless, his hands tracing patterns in the air as his silver-white aura expanded outward, like a second sun threatening to break through the void. Stop thinking of him as just a disciple, she muttered to herself, voice low. He's more than that now. System warning. Target spiritual realm approaching critical threshold. Immediate intervention recommended. She didn't need the system to tell her. Her instincts, honed over decades in the stellar frontier, were screaming. She entered the sanctum quietly, the floor thrumming as Li Yuren's energy brushed against the vessel's spiritual conduits. Each step was a risk. His aura, normally calm, was now a storm of raw serpent chi, flickering like lightning within a cloud of snow. He didn't notice her at first. His eyes were closed, his body perfectly still, but his spiritual realm twisted and turned like a living entity. Threads of chi lashed out in arcs, distorting the arrays, bending holographic swords into unnatural shapes. Li Yuren, she said softly. He shivered slightly at the sound, but didn't open his eyes. I cannot stop. Not yet, he said, voice low, almost mechanical. If I suppress it, the core will fracture. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Of course. The hybrid bloodline doesn't allow half measures. Then we do it together, she said, stepping closer. She spread her arms and let her aura radiate outward, silver and cold, a cage of calm and control. He paused, recognizing the rare intrusion. A flicker of confusion passed through his serpent eyes. Together. Yes. Dual realm meditation. She had performed it only once in her life, years ago, to stabilize a broken fleet core. Dangerous. Meridians could shatter, chi could backfire, even a cultivator of her level could be left crippled. But if she didn't act, the frontier would burn. Li Yuren hesitated for the briefest moment, then nodded, recognizing the impossibility of refusal. Then I follow your cycle. The sanctum grew silent, except for the hum of their spiritual energies. She and Li Yuren settled opposite each other, palms hovering midair, eyes locked in the faint light of his chaotic aura. Slowly, deliberately, they began the meditation. Their chi cycles linked like two rivers meeting in a single channel. She guided, he followed. Where his energy surged violently, she absorbed, twisted, and returned it with precision. Where his spirit faltered, she bolstered, weaving stability through every tendril of his spiritual realm. Time stretched thin. The stars outside shifted slowly, unnoticed. Days passed. 7 of them. They spoke not a word. Breathing synchronized with the subtle pulse of chi, hearts steadying alongside their energies. Each day left her weaker, her meridian strained, yet she did not falter. Each night, the edge of her exhaustion pressed against the fragile harmony, and yet she continued. On the 4th day, a surge struck. Li Yuren's serpent blood flared uncontrollably, a bolt of energy snapping through the sanctum like a chain of meteors. Arrays cracked, holographic swords shattered, and even the ship's structural barriers groaned. Su Minglan gritted her teeth. She pressed every ounce of her cultivation into a binding flow, threading it through his torrent of energy. Sparks licked the edges of her robes, her meridian screamed. Pain flared up her arms, and her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. "Hold," she whispered, barely audible. Her hands glowed as they danced through the arcs of raw chi. "Trust me." The serpent spirit howled in his mind. Energy collided. Chaos threatened to erupt. And yet, slowly, imperceptibly, the storm began to calm. By the 7th day, the room was still. The storm dissipated like mist under sunlight. Li Yuren's aura no longer surged uncontrollably. It hummed instead, coiled and restrained, calm and powerful. His spiritual realm shone with faint silver light, the serpent chi fully integrated into his own cultivation. Li Yuren collapsed to his knees, exhausted beyond words. His hair clung to his sweat-soaked face, robes singed at the edges from minor feedback surges. But even through the fatigue, he lifted his gaze to her. "You saved me," he said, voice low, almost reverent. Again. Su Minglan's own chest ached. She crouched slightly, letting her aura linger faintly around him, a protective bubble, a silent affirmation. "You would have destroyed yourself if I hadn't. That's all." He swallowed hard, eyes shining with an emotion he rarely allowed, vulnerability. "If you keep saving me, I'll forget what hatred feels like." Her heart stuttered. Not for the first time, she felt it, a stirring that made her want to reach out, to protect, to nurture. Yet she forced it down, quiet and careful. "You won't need to remember hatred," she said softly, turning her head slightly. "Not here. Not now." The medics and attendants who came in to check the sanctum later whispered among themselves. She linked her chi with the hybrids," one said, eyes wide. "No one has dared attempt that since the first Iron Admiral." "She could have shattered herself," said another, voice trembling. "But she contained it. Stabilized him." The whispers reached even the bridge crew. Rumors spread that the Iron Admiral had not only saved the hybrid's life, but risked her own meridians again. Some said she was becoming soft. Others muttered about obsession, about guilt, about impossible loyalty. Su Minglan ignored them all. She was too drained to care. Too focused on the quiet pulse of his spiritual energy, now safely coiled, now vibrant, now restrained. System update. Target spiritual realm stabilized. Merit plus 150. Host emotional resonance rising. She let herself lean back on the floor of the sanctum for a moment, catching her breath. Her robes clung to her sweat-soaked skin, and a faint ache lingered in her arms. But it was worth it. Li Yuren, still kneeling, slowly bowed his head in respect. Not the formal bow of a disciple obeying a master, but something deeper, an acknowledgement that went beyond words, beyond loyalty, beyond fear. "Rest now," she whispered, her hand hovering over his shoulder. "We've done enough for one cycle." He hesitated, glancing up at her. For a moment, she caught the faintest flicker of something almost human in his eyes. Gratitude, trust, maybe, warmth. Finally, he exhaled, closing his eyes. "Yes, master," he said. And she allowed herself to sit back fully, her palms pressed to the floor, feeling the aftershocks of energy ripple through the sanctum. 7 days of meditation, of risking everything, had ended in quiet victory. The stars outside the observation deck shimmered faintly, reflecting the harmony now present within the Azure Dome. For the first time since her rebirth into this story, Su Minglan allowed herself a single thought: we might just make it through this together. The system chimed softly, almost like a sigh. Target hostility minimized. Spiritual resonance stabilized. Merit plus 150. She smiled faintly, though her body trembled from exhaustion. Li Yuren's whisper drifted across the sanctum, almost inaudible. "Thank you, master." Her heart stirred quietly, unwillingly, undeniably. The awakening had passed. But the bond they forged during those 7 days and nights would carry them into every storm to come. Chapter 6. The Azure Dome floated silently in the void near the stellar confluence, its hull reflecting faint starlight and distant nebula gases. Su Minglan sat at the command console, eyes scanning incoming transmissions with the cold precision expected of an Iron Admiral, but inside, her mind was a storm of calculation. A summons had arrived from the Galactic Council, the governing body of all interstellar cultivator factions. Normally, their communications were formalities, often a list of minor inspections or fleet reassignment orders. But this message was different. Subject: Li Yuren, hybrid disciple of Admiral Su Minglan, approaching Saint Realm cultivation threshold. Immediate reassignment to Frontier Command Sector Omega 9 recommended. Galactic Council approval required for all deviations. Compliance expected. Her fingers paused over the console. Saint Realm. Li Yuren's spiritual potential had grown beyond anything even she had anticipated. His hybrid bloodline, the fusion of a serpent spirit and celestial chi, had allowed him to stabilize his realm faster than any precedent recorded in Alliance archives. To the Council, he was a political weapon. Dangerous. Unpredictable. A threat that could tip the balance of interstellar power. To her, he was hers. Later that day, in the presence of the fleet, the order was delivered officially. Su Minglan's expression was flawless, unreadable. "Yes," she said calmly. "Li Yuren will be reassigned to Frontier Sector Omega 9 immediately." The crew and attending council delegates murmured in surprise. No one doubted her compliance. The Iron Admiral had always executed orders with unquestioned rigor. But beneath her composure, her mind raced. She could not, would not, allow him to be sent to the outer frontier, a desolate cluster where his spirit would be isolated and vulnerable. Rogue cultivators, energy anomalies, and political opportunists were rampant there. She outlined the convoy as required by protocol, the holographic map glowing before the officers. All data logged, all channels open. Everyone watching, everything perfect. Yet in secret, she activated a series of hidden protocols buried deep within the ship's spiritual arrays. A fake convoy was constructed, holographic ships projected along the designated course, trails of spiritual chi mimicking Li Yuren's unique aura, all recorded in Alliance sensors. Meanwhile, she redirected the real vessel to a hidden sector within the Spirit Nebula, a region dense with spiritual fog and impenetrable to standard detection arrays. When the system chirped, warning of potential rebellion, she muttered with a smirk, "If I lose merit, I'll earn it back." System alert. Host deviation detected. Political risk rising. "Let them detect it," she whispered to herself. "I'll handle it if it comes to that. For now, he's safe." In the hidden sector, Li Yuren's chamber was lit with soft violet light, his aura flickering gently as he completed his meditation cycle. He looked up when she appeared, expression calm but curious. "You disobeyed the Council's orders," he said softly. "Why?" Her lips quirked faintly. "Because the Council doesn't know the first rule of survival. The first rule is that you live. The second rule is that you live unharmed." He studied her for a long moment, his serpent blood pulsing faintly within him. Then, without a word, he returned to his meditation. Even in silence, she could sense the gratitude and something deeper, trust, perhaps even a reluctant dependence. Back at the public fleet, reports of the convoy's successful transfer were received. Council monitors, satisfied by the projections, filed the mission as complete. No one suspected a thing. Meanwhile, she oversaw the cloaked training routines for Li Yuren. He practiced sword and spirit array manipulations under her guidance, refining his Saint Realm potential, free from the prying eyes of politicians and rival factions. 7 days passed in quiet intensity. Outside, the stellar confluence shimmered with spiritual currents. Inside, master and disciple worked in tandem, energies aligning, pulses synchronizing. One evening, as Li Yuren practiced a complex formation, he paused and tilted his head slightly. "Master," he said, voice low, almost hesitant, "I do not wish to abandon you, even secretly. I will return to your side." Her chest tightened. She had known this was coming. The hybrid's loyalty and bond had grown too strong. But to have him risk defying orders, even in secret, was reckless. "Then you will," she said firmly. "But you will move only when it is safe. Not before." He inclined his head once, subtle and respectful, then resumed training. Yet she could feel his spiritual presence lingering near her, watching, connected, protective. System update, host soul brightness increased. Connection deepened. The chime echoed faintly in her mind. She didn't need it. She could feel the shift herself. Li Yuren's aura, once coiled with restraint and barely disguised fury, had softened. The serpent spirit within him was still dangerous, still potent, but no longer a threat to her, to the fleet, or to himself. Word of this safe transfer and Admiral Su's impeccable execution reached the council. Members discussed in hushed tones, unaware that the real Li Yuren was hundreds of light years away, cloaked behind the veils of spiritual fog. Remarkable, one elder murmured. The Iron Admiral's efficiency never fails to impress. He'll be a loyal asset at Omega-9 as ordered. Indeed, said another. It is fortunate. The hybrid's potential is great, yet dangerous. Better it remains under her watch than in untested hands. Su Minglan allowed herself a faint smile. If they only knew. Night fell in the Spirit Nebula. The hidden sector was quiet, the violet clouds of energy curling like smoke around the ship. Li Yuren meditated in the main sanctum, the faint residual warmth of her aura brushing against him. He had no need to move. He felt her presence even when she wasn't beside him. Su Minglan stood at the observation deck, arms crossed, watching the stars. Each faint pulse of chi from the nebula, each shimmer of energy from the distant frontier fleets, reminded her of the dangers that still lurked. But for once, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had outmaneuvered the political machinery, preserved her disciples' safety, and strengthened their connection. Merit will be regained, she whispered softly. Even if the council frowns, even if the system complains. For him, it is worth everything. Below, Li Yuren opened his eyes slowly, sensing her resolve. He didn't speak, but his calm aura carried a silent promise. I will not abandon you. In the endless void of the stellar frontier, amidst drifting nebulae and faintly glowing chi streams, the Iron Admiral and her hybrid disciple shared a quiet victory. The galaxy might see compliance, duty, and strategy, but behind the veil, trust and loyalty had deepened in ways no council or fleet report could ever capture. And beat, the system's tone softened, noting the shift in their bond. Ho's soul brightness increased. Connection deepened. Su Minglan allowed herself a rare smile, hands pressed lightly to the console. He is safe. He is mine to guide. And he chooses to return to my side. The stars outside shimmered faintly, a silent witness to the quiet intrigue that had unfolded in the shadows. Chapter 7 The Lingxiu Command Fleet orbited silently near the edge of the celestial rift, its ships spread like silver constellations across the void. The calm was deceptive. Deep within the fleet's core, a traitor had been at work, tampering with the Alliance Spirit Array, a massive network of chi conduits that amplified cultivation energy across vessels. Su Minglan sensed it almost immediately. The pulse of spiritual energy was jagged, uneven, and bleeding. It wasn't subtle. This sabotage wasn't meant to kill the fleet outright. It was designed to destabilize, to create a target, to sow suspicion. Her eyes narrowed. Li Yuren is on deck. The message came too late. Within the hour, whispers had spread across the fleet. The hybrid disciple is responsible for the Spirit Array's failure. Suspicion turned quickly into accusations, and accusations into outright hostility. He was hunted. Li Yuren moved with quiet determination, but even he couldn't hide from the attacks of cultivators who had once been comrades. Spiritual swords sliced through the void, arrays twisted in the void like lightning, and ships exploded in bursts of pure chi energy. The battlefield became a chaotic storm of flashing light and boiling spiritual pressure. Despite his calm exterior, Su Minglan could feel the coiled power within him tightening like a spring. Every accusation, every attack, every whispered betrayal lit the serpent spirit inside him. Stop, she hissed through the calm array. Withdraw, or I will hold you accountable. No one listened. The hybrid's aura surged involuntarily. Then it happened. Li Yuren's spiritual realm erupted. Silver flame unfurled from him like a living tide, scorching half the battlefield. Vessels were enveloped in searing chi, spiritual shields warped and cracked, and cultivators were sent tumbling into the void. His hair floated in zero gravity, eyes glowing like molten silver, the hybrid energy roaring in uncontrolled power. The storm was both beautiful and terrifying, a vision of raw, untempered potential. From the bridge of the flagship, Su Minglan's eyes burned with focus. She could feel the boundaries of her own spiritual veins stretch in anticipation. She didn't hesitate. Domain activation, she ordered, her aura flaring outward. A translucent sphere of silver and violet light erupted around the central battlefield. The energy waves from Li Yuren's outburst struck it like thunder against a mountain, crackling but unable to pass through. The storm within the domain twisted and churned. Every second, the hybrid's power threatened to rupture the protective field. Su Minglan clenched her fists. She would not allow him to destroy everything he had fought to protect. With a deep, steadying breath, she extended her spiritual veins. Silver light traced along her arms, chest, and neck, her own life force now intertwined with her cultivation arrays. Pain flared, bright and burning as she channeled it into the domain to stabilize it. Li Yuren, she shouted, her voice amplified by the spiritual arrays. I am here. Stop fighting it, or you'll burn everything you love. For a moment, he faltered. The storm within him flickered, energy spiraling but wavering. Her aura, her presence, touched something deep within him, a calm anchor in the tidal wave of his unleashed power. Then he saw her. The Iron Admiral, standing at the center of the domain, hair and robes whipping violently, veins of pure spiritual energy glowing along her body. Her aura was no longer just hers. It had merged with the arrays, with the battlefield, with the very chi of the stellar rift. She was absorbing his energy, restraining it, even as pain shot through her veins. He froze, silver eyes wide. For the first time, he realized that she was willing to burn herself to save him. The storm began to subside, but slowly. Every pulse of silver flame she absorbed tore at her spiritual veins. Every breath she drew was sharp, ragged, and laced with blood from minor ruptures along her meridians. Li Yuren reached toward her, but she waved him back. Do not come closer. You must not endanger yourself or me. Yet as the final remnants of the uncontrolled energy dissipated, her body finally collapsed to one knee. The aura bubble flickered and stabilized. Around them, scorched silver flame lingered like drifting starlight, ships drifting amid the aftermath of chaos. He moved instantly to her side, catching her gently as she slumped forward. Her robes were scorched in places, faint veins of blood along her arms, and her chest heaved with exhaustion. You always save me, he whispered, voice rough with disbelief. Why? She looked up at him, faintly smiling, even as pain lingered in every fiber of her body. Her silver eyes met his, sharp yet gentle. Because, this time, you're worth saving. The words were simple, yet they carried weight beyond any cultivation achievement, beyond political power, beyond a lifetime of galactic wars. They resonated deep within him, and for a moment, Li Yuren's usual calm and distant mask faltered. He began, but stopped. His hands hovered near hers, unsure how to help without causing further harm. She let him linger in that hesitation, faintly amused despite her exhaustion. Don't try to repay me, she said softly. This is not a transaction. This is survival. And you surviving is all that matters. The fleet slowly regained order. Some ships had sustained damage, spiritual arrays required realignment, and murmurs of fear and awe circulated among the surviving cultivators. Yet none could deny what had happened. The Iron Admiral had entered the heart of a hybrid's unleashed storm, absorbed the raw energy, and emerged alive to protect him. Even the traitor who had sabotaged the arrays was revealed when the hybrid's flare subsided. They had been powerless against her domain, trapped and restrained until Council enforcers arrived. Justice was swift, though Su Minglan did not linger to witness it. Later, in the sanctum of the flagship, Li Yuren knelt beside her. She had recovered, though faint lines of exhaustion and minor burns marked her skin. The silver veins along her arms had faded, but she still radiated a faint residual aura of the storm she had contained. He lowered his gaze, voice quiet, almost reverent. Master, I don't know how to repay you. Every time I think I can handle it, you step in. Why? Her chest tightened in a way she did not expect. She brushed a faint strand of hair from her forehead. Because, this time, you're worth saving. Not because you deserve it. Not because it is required. But because you matter. His silver eyes softened, the serpent blood within him coiling and relaxing, finally acknowledging the bond that had been growing between them. System update. Target spiritual stability maintained. Merit plus 200. Host rescue action completed. Emotional resonance rising. She leaned back slightly, exhaustion claiming her fully now, but her eyes remained sharp, watching him. Even in defeat, even in chaos, he had proven his worth, not just in strength, but in trust. And in that moment, as the remains of the silver flame drifted through the void like ghostly starlight, Su Minglan realized something dangerous and undeniable. This hybrid, once a vessel of hatred and potential destruction, had become indispensable to her, not only for her mission, but for her heart. Li Yuren whispered again, barely audible, I will not forget. Not this time. She allowed herself the faintest smile, even as her body shuddered from fatigue. Good. Then rest. The galaxy doesn't forgive weakness, and neither do I. And somewhere, deep within the stellar rift, the azure dome hummed quietly, carrying the Iron Admiral and her hybrid disciple forward, bonded now by trust, survival, and shared storms that left silver flames in their wake. The stars shimmered faintly, as if witnessing the quiet, defiant bond that had formed amid chaos and destruction. Chapter 8. The Azure Dome slipped through the void like a shadow, leaving the scarred battlefield behind. The stellar frontier stretched infinitely before them, but Su Minglan had no desire to remain amid political intrigue or fleets still murmuring with rumors of Li Yuren's uncontrollable power. Her gaze fixed on the distant coordinates she had long memorized, the Star Abyss Sanctuary. A forgotten cultivation planet, abandoned by the galactic sex centuries ago, yet saturated with primordial chi, the kind that could stabilize even the most volatile hybrid bloodline. A place where cultivators could rebuild their foundations without interference. Li Yuren remained silent at her side, his silver aura calm but still flickering faintly, remnants of the storm he had unleashed over Lingxiu. He followed her without question, a quiet agreement passing between them that this sanctuary was theirs alone. The Star Abyss rose from the shadows of the void like an ancient relic. Its surface was jagged with crystal spires and rivers of flowing chi, reflecting light that seemed to come from nowhere. Strange flora thrived here, imbued with residual energy of millennia, glowing faintly under alien constellations. The air itself hummed with potential, each inhalation vibrating against the inner meridians. Su Minglan guided the ship into orbit. "This will be our base," she said softly, almost reverently. "No fleets. No politics. Only cultivation." Li Yuren nodded once, expression unreadable, though the faintest flicker of relief passed through his silver eyes. He had been hunted, blamed, tested beyond endurance, and now finally, there was silence. On the first day, they walked across the crystal plains, each step sending ripples of spiritual energy through the ground. Li Yuren's fingers brushed against the glowing flora, drawing out threads of chi to stabilize his own. Su Minglan's senses expanded, feeling each fluctuation, adjusting her aura to harmonize with the planet. System update: host environmental resonance +50. Target spiritual recovery +80. "Careful," she said as Li Yuren reached for a crystalline tree. "The chi here is dense. Too much too quickly could overload your hybrid core." He glanced at her, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "I thought I would have to die to learn balance." She didn't answer at first, watching him carefully. Then, almost imperceptibly, a smile curved her lips. "Not with me here." Days passed in silent rhythm. They meditated beneath twin waterfalls of condensed chi, practiced sword formations along ridges that caught the violet starlight, and rebuilt Li Yuren's foundation. Every day, the hybrid's aura became more stable, his serpent blood coiling less violently, merging more harmoniously with the celestial energy. On the fourth day, Su Minglan unearthed a long-lost scripture hidden within the planet's archives. The Harmony Scripture, a dual cultivation manual designed to balance light and shadow chi, originally intended for master-disciple pairs. Its pages glowed faintly with ancient energy, resonating deeply with the planet itself. "Li Yuren," she said softly, holding the open scroll, "this will help you integrate the hybrid essence fully. It requires trust." He studied it for a long moment. His silver eyes reflected both curiosity and caution. "Then let us begin," he said quietly. They sat across from each other on a flat crystal platform, chi cycles linking as instructed by the scripture. Light and shadow spiraled around them in streams of energy, intertwining and stabilizing. The first hours were awkward. Both had to adjust to the rhythm of the other's cultivation, subtle shifts of breath and movement guiding the flow. But as night fell and unfamiliar constellations glimmered above, their motions grew fluid. Laughter, faint and rare, escaped Li Yuren as Su Minglan misstepped during a technique, and she returned it with a mock glare that made him grin. It was the first time she had heard him laugh freely since her rebirth into this body. Night after night, they sat under the alien stars, wordless comfort settling over them like a soft mantle. Su Minglan allowed herself to observe him, unguarded, while he traced patterns in the air with his hands, stabilizing his spiritual realm and watching her carefully in return. Words became unnecessary. Through the long hours, she realized just how much he had come to rely on her, not merely as a master, but as a companion who could understand the tempest within him. And he realized, in turn, that he could trust her to restrain him without fear, to guide him without judgment. By the 10th day, Li Yuren's spiritual realm had grown quiet, powerful yet serene. He could feel his hybrid bloodline fully integrated with the celestial qi, no longer threatening to spiral out of control. Su Minglan, exhausted from guiding him, sat back on the crystalline ground, her robes damp with condensation from the qi-rich air. "You've done well," she murmured, faintly smiling. "You're finally balanced." He knelt before her, not in the formal posture of a disciple, but in one of quiet respect and acknowledgement. "I could not have done this alone. Not ever." She reached out, letting her hand hover near his shoulder, a faint brush of energy connecting them. "And you never will," she replied softly. On the following day, a faint glimmer of humor sparked between them. Li Yuren returned to the Crystal Forge, a place where the planet's minerals could be condensed into spiritual weapons. He worked silently, his hands moving with skill as he drew on his integrated qi, condensing crystallized starfire into a blade. When he finally handed it to her, she examined it carefully. The blade shimmered with a soft violet glow, the edges humming faintly with spiritual energy. "I named it Quiet Fire," he said simply. "For you." Her breath caught at the thought behind it. The blade reflected both his craftsmanship and his intent, a weapon, but also a symbol of his trust and connection. She sheathed it at her side, heart stirring in ways she had not admitted even to herself. Weeks turned into months in the sanctuary. Together, they explored the planet, studied the harmony scripture, and practiced cultivation techniques that harmonized light and shadow qi in ways neither had attempted before. They discovered hidden springs of primordial qi, long dormant, and harvested them to further strengthen their foundations. On clear nights, they meditated beneath twin moons, energies intertwining silently in the absence of words. Their bond deepened, subtle touches, shared laughter, and the quiet assurance that neither would leave the other's side. Every day, Su Minglan felt her own spiritual awareness expand. Her mastery over her domain, over the energies of the star abyss, and over her own cultivation had grown far beyond what the Galactic Council or the Alliance fleets could imagine. Yet it was tempered now, not by ambition, but by trust and care for Li Yuren and for the fragile balance they both shared. System update: Host cultivation accelerated. Target spiritual stability plus 200. Connection strengthened. By the time the twin moons aligned perfectly above the crystalline peaks, both master and disciple had achieved a harmony of spirit, a silent understanding that words could not capture. And the sword, Quiet Fire, hung at Su Minglan's side as a reminder. The bond they shared was no longer just strategic or cultivational. It was personal, unspoken, and unbreakable. The Star Abyss Sanctuary was no longer just a place of refuge. It had become their realm, a hidden world where the galaxy's judgments and dangers could not reach. Here, they were not just an Iron Admiral and her hybrid disciple. They were cultivators, partners, and, perhaps quietly, something more. Above them, alien constellations glittered like scattered diamonds across the void. Beneath those stars, the flames of trust, care, and quiet devotion burned brighter than any battle, any storm, any fleet could ever hope to challenge. And somewhere deep in the spiritual currents of the planet, the harmony scripture pulsed faintly, acknowledging its rightful heirs. For Su Minglan and Li Yuren, the hidden realm was not merely a sanctuary, it was the foundation of the future they would face together, one step, one breath, one quiet fire at a time. Chapter 9: The Heart of the Galaxy was a cathedral of stars, cosmic winds, and spiritual energy. The Celestial Gateway, an ancient conduit connecting the ley lines that threaded the galaxy, shimmered like a translucent lattice of silver and violet light. It had been centuries since anyone dared to enter it, and fewer still had returned. Yet now, the gateway pulsed erratically, flickering as the cosmic ley lines, the flows of qi that allowed star travel and sustained cultivator civilizations, began to collapse. Entire star systems trembled under the strain, vessels flung from their courses by fluctuating spiritual currents, and cultivators felt their realms faltering under the pressure of destabilized qi. The Alliance, once mighty and coordinated, now teetered on the brink of collapse. Every fleet struggled to stabilize their own spiritual arrays, but no single cultivator, not even a Saint Realm prodigy, could repair the ley lines alone. Only a pair whose realms were perfectly synchronized could hope to channel the cosmic flow safely, one to anchor, the other to guide, their energies weaving together like twin rivers forming a single stream. Su Minglan and Li Yuren had trained for years in the Star Abyss Sanctuary, harmonizing light and shadow qi, mastering dual cultivation, and synchronizing their spiritual rhythms. They alone possessed the precision, stamina, and trust necessary to undertake the mission. The fleet formed a protective perimeter around the celestial gateway. The outer vessels projected massive arrays to stabilize the surrounding void, while the two cultivators approached the entrance in their own vessel, the Azure Dome, cloaked in silver energy and woven with protective glyphs. Li Yuren's silver eyes reflected the gateway's light, calm and focused. "Are you ready, Master?" he asked softly. Su Minglan's hands hovered over her spiritual conduits, the faint glow of quiet fire at her side resonating with her aura. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "Once we enter, there's no turning back. Every pulse, every breath must be synchronized." He nodded. "Then we proceed together." The moment they stepped into the gateway, reality shifted. Stars became threads of light, flowing like molten silver through an infinite void. The spiritual currents lashed at them, testing the integrity of their realms. Even the slightest misstep could fracture their qi, scattering their essence across the galaxy. Su Minglan extended her aura toward him, and he mirrored her movements. Their spiritual realms intertwined seamlessly, light and shadow flowing together, serpent blood harmonizing with celestial essence, energies coiling and dancing like twin dragons. System alert. Target synchronization at 75%. Proceed with caution. The gateway responded immediately. Pulses of erratic energy attempted to repel them, surging like cosmic waves. Li Yuren gritted his teeth, his hybrid essence flaring, but Su Minglan's hand rested lightly on his arm, a tether of calm and focus. "Flow with me," she whispered. "Not against it. Let the gateway guide us." He exhaled sharply and shifted. The silver flames of his serpent spirit dimmed slightly, folding into the rhythm she set. Together, their merged aura became a conduit through which the chaotic ley lines could flow, stabilized and redirected. Time became meaningless. Minutes, or was it hours, passed as they traced the network of ley lines. Each pulse of qi was a knot in the fabric of the galaxy, each misalignment a potential rupture. They moved as one, their combined spiritual power wrapping around unstable streams of energy, smoothing turbulence, correcting distortions, and weaving coherence into the fractured currents. At one point, a massive surge erupted, throwing them backward. The gateway's lattice trembled violently. "Hold!" Su Minglan shouted, extending both arms to channel the surge directly through her veins. Pain shot through her meridians, searing and deep, but she gritted her teeth and pressed onward. Li Yuren mirrored her effort, coiling his serpent energy around hers, absorbing part of the feedback and returning it as harmonious flow. The surge subsided, leaving them both panting, but still synchronized. System alert. Target synchronization at 95%. Critical threshold approaching. The gateway groaned, the threads of qi quivering like fragile glass. One misstep now could annihilate their spiritual cores. Su Minglan's eyes met Li Yuren's, and in that instant, words became unnecessary. Every glance, every pulse, every motion was a command, a response, a perfect rhythm. System advisory. Final alignment phase initiated. They stretched their auras outward, forming a lattice of light and shadow, the culmination of years of dual cultivation. Their energies became one, flowing through the gateway like a single river of silver fire. The chaotic ley lines accepted their guidance, weaving into stability, feeding star systems and cultivator civilizations with renewed qi. A crescendo of energy rippled through the gateway, blasting outward in pulses of silver and violet light. The fleet outside trembled, sensing the cosmic currents realigning. Star systems hummed as the flow stabilized, vessels stopped drifting, spiritual arrays returned to normal, and cultivators felt the pressure on their realm's ease. Within the gateway, Su Minglan and Li Yuren stood side by side, their energy still linked, still harmonized. The strain was immense, but neither faltered. For a moment, they simply existed as one, master and disciple, cultivators, partners, bound in perfect synchronization. Then, as the final pulse of chaotic chi was absorbed and transformed, the gateway shone brilliantly. Light poured across the void, cascading across the fleet, bathing everything in ethereal radiance. System voice. Mission complete. Target stabilized. Host cultivation breakthrough approved. Ascension pathway unlocked for both. Su Minglan felt the system's words resonate through her mind, not as a command or warning, but as affirmation. Her spiritual veins tingled, every meridian, every pulse, every blade of chi alive with potential. Beside her, Li Yuren's aura shimmered with equal intensity, his hybrid bloodline now fully integrated and perfected. They had done it. Together. The gateway began to pulse more steadily, inviting them forward. Su Minglan's hand brushed against Li Yuren's briefly, and he responded instinctively, their energy brushing, intertwining once again. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. He nodded, silver flames flickering in the depths of his eyes. Always. Together, they stepped into the heart of the celestial gateway. Light enveloped them, stretching infinitely, the cosmic chi cascading over and through their bodies. The sensation was indescribable: freedom, power, understanding, unity. They were no longer merely cultivators, they were one with the flow of the galaxy itself. Side by side, they ascended, their silhouettes bathed in ethereal brilliance. The twin pulses of their energies merged into a single force, illuminating the gateway and echoing across star systems, leaving ripples of restored chi in their wake. Even as the light became overwhelming, even as the boundaries of their physical forms dissolved into pure spiritual essence, they maintained connection, side by side, bound by trust, cultivation, and an unspoken promise forged through battles, storms, and quiet nights beneath alien constellations. When the radiance finally subsided, the gateway was calm, stable, and renewed. The cosmic ley lines hummed in perfect harmony, the galaxy safe from collapse, its cultivators free to continue their paths. And at the heart of the gateway, two figures stood, or perhaps no longer stood in the ordinary sense. They were ascended, their spiritual forms radiant and fully synchronized, their bond unbreakable. Su Minglan's voice, faint but clear, echoed in the spiritual currents. "We made it, together." Li Yuren's reply followed instantly, a soft harmony, side by side. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, among the threads of chi and the glow of distant stars, master and disciple had completed their mission. They had restored the ley lines, stabilized the realms, and unlocked the path to ascension, not as separate cultivators, but as a perfect, unified force. The celestial gateway pulsed quietly, acknowledging their success, as they stepped forward into the light of ascension, ready to face the boundless possibilities of the cosmos, together. The system's final chime faded into silence, leaving only the quiet hum of interstellar chi, the light of countless stars, and the presence of two cultivators who had rewritten their fate side by side. Chapter 10. The galaxy was quiet, not the emptiness of the void, but the gentle hum of countless star systems in perfect balance. Centuries had passed, yet for those who looked closely into the skies, something remarkable had emerged. Two new constellations now shimmered above the stellar frontier, twin stars, circling one another endlessly, moving in perfect harmony. Legends whispered in hushed tones among cultivators and spacefarers alike, the twin ascendants, the Ice Admiral and her disciple of flame, who rebuilt the ley lines and vanished into the higher realms. Few knew the truth, fewer still had seen them. Su Minglan and Li Yuren, once mortal cultivators of extraordinary talent, now existed beyond the veil of the galaxy, beyond the reach of fleets and politics, ascended into the immortal realm. The celestial expanse, the realm of immortals, was unlike anything mortal eyes could comprehend. Light flowed as substance, chi shimmered like liquid starlight, and the echoes of time were visible as threads weaving through the vast emptiness. Minglan floated above a crystalline platform that seemed grown from the very essence of stars, quiet fire, her sword, hovering beside her, glowing faintly as if alive. Li Yuren hovered near her, his silver eyes reflecting galaxies in miniature. The serpent spirit within him had fully harmonized with his celestial chi. He had grown not just in cultivation, but in understanding, in restraint, in the quiet depths of emotion he had once suppressed. "Do you ever tire of this?" he asked, voice soft, carrying across the void. Minglan turned toward him, her expression serene but tinged with amusement. "Tire of immortality," she said lightly. "No. Not when the galaxy is alive beneath us, not when you are by my side." He studied her for a long moment, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It's strange, he murmured, almost to himself, to live without boundaries, without danger, and yet feel more alive than I ever did in the battlefield. She tilted her head, letting the soft cascade of her hair drift in the lightless currents. Perhaps it's not immortality that makes you feel alive, she replied quietly. Perhaps it's knowing we have each other. The words hung between them, fragile and weightless, yet charged with the unspoken truth of centuries of shared struggle. Battles, storms, and silent nights on the Star Abyss sanctuary had forged something deeper than loyalty or dependence. They had forged love. Li Yuren took a cautious step closer. His hand hovered near hers, the faint flicker of silver flame brushing against the warm aura of her spiritual energy. Minglan's heart, though steady after centuries, skipped in that brief moment of proximity. You always said I was worth saving, he said softly, voice carrying a hint of vulnerability rare for the serpent-born hybrid. Centuries ago, it was for cultivation, for survival, but now I understand. I would save you, endlessly if I could. Her gaze softened, the immortal veil of duty melting into something tender and profoundly human. And I, she said, reaching for his hand, would do the same. Not because of merit, not because of destiny, but because of you. Their hands met, fingers intertwining. The silver flames of his aura mingled with the violet light of hers, weaving into a radiant pattern that mirrored the twin stars above. Time lost meaning. They drifted through the immortal expanse, exploring realms that mortals could not perceive. Comets became playgrounds, nebulae cascaded around them like endless ribbons, and spiritual chi rippled beneath their feet like gentle waves of consciousness. Each day was filled with quiet discovery. Minglan taught Li Yuren new sword forms, refined over centuries, each more elegant than the last. He, in turn, shared the secret patterns of the hybrid serpent chi he had perfected, movements of grace and restraint, power folded into finesse. And in the quiet moments, they simply existed together. Sitting on platforms of crystallized starlight, watching galaxies spin and drift, their conversations turned from strategy to the trivial, the personal. You've grown fond of quiet moments, Minglan noted one day, her voice teasing. He smirked faintly, eyes reflecting a dozen newborn stars. And you've grown fond of making me explain them, he replied. Centuries of silence, and you still need words. She laughed softly, a sound that echoed across the immortal expanse like chimes in the void. Some things must be said, even if only to remind us we are alive, together. Romance unfolded slowly, naturally, without urgency or fear. Each touch, each glance carried weight. Immortality had given them time, yet it had not diminished the thrill of connection, the subtle warmth of shared energy, the intimacy of shared cultivation cycles in the quiet of the celestial expanse. One evening, beneath a swirling nebula of violet and gold, Li Yuren presented her with a fragment of crystallized starfire, the same material he had once forged quiet fire from. A gift, he said, offering the crystal. For you and for us. Minglan accepted it, feeling the warmth of his spiritual energy embedded within. It is beautiful, she whispered, and then added, almost shyly, just like you. He laughed softly, a rare sound, and it resonated with her heart. Their auras intertwined, flowing in patterns of light and shadow, a dance of centuries of trust, survival, and now love. Centuries flowed by like rivers of starlight. They watched civilizations rise and fall below, but the galaxy, once teetering on the edge of collapse, now thrived. Ley lines shimmered with stability, star systems hummed with life, and cultivators of all levels prospered under the quiet influence of the twin ascendants. Yet, despite their power, their influence, their immortal status, Minglan and Li Yuren chose the quiet life among the stars. Not to hide, not to rule, but to exist together, free from politics, free from wars, free from expectation. And in those moments of quiet, when nothing stirred except the rhythm of cosmic chi, they would drift close, hands brushing, a shared smile, a wordless acknowledgement that they were no longer master and disciple, but equals, partners, and lovers. Eventually, they returned to the celestial gateway, the site of their final mortal trial. The twin stars above it shimmered faintly in resonance with them, a cosmic echo of their bond. Standing together, hands entwined, they gazed down at the galaxy they had saved, feeling the pulse of life beneath their immortal forms. You saved the stars, Li Yuren murmured, voice low, almost reverent. Minglan's lips curved into a gentle smile, her violet eyes reflecting countless constellations. No, she said softly, leaning slightly toward him, you gave them reason to shine. He laughed, a quiet sound that seemed to ripple through the fabric of reality itself, and then drew her close. Her head rested lightly against his chest, silver and violet auras mingling, forming a cocoon of warmth and quiet eternity. The system's voice, once relentless and mechanical, chimed one final time in her mind. Mission complete. Host cultivation stabilized. Ascension achieved. Emotional resonance peak confirmed. Freedom granted. And then it was silent. No instructions, no warnings, no calculations, only the vast, living galaxy and the twin spirits who had earned their immortality together. In the boundless expanse of light and energy, Su, Minglan, and Li Yuren stood side by side, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. Centuries of trials, battles, loss, and trust had culminated not just in ascension, but in the quiet, enduring warmth of love that not even the stars themselves could extinguish. They were eternal. They were together. And above, twin stars traced a perfect orbit, circling endlessly, reflecting the rhythm of two immortal hearts that had weathered storms, defied fate, and finally, at last, found peace in one another. End beat, the galaxy thrummed beneath them, alive and vibrant. The twin ascendants had arrived, and quiet fire, both sword and spirit, would burn eternal. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more tales from Sparrow's Realm. Until next time, keep listening, and let your imagination soar.